The Young and the Restless spoilers. Los Angeles, a city built on dreams and shadows, was no stranger to secrets. Beneath its glamorous exterior, the city thrived on the darkness that hid behind every palm tree and neon sign. For Victor and Nikki Newman, this city was more than just a backdrop for their family drama. It was a place where their past, long buried, had the power to rise again and threaten everything they had worked for. When they arrived in LA, it wasn't just to be by their son's side after his terrible accident. They were here to protect their legacy. Noah Newman, their pride and joy, the one person who represented the future of their empire, was in danger. And danger was a force they both knew intimately. Victor had always been a man of control, a man who bent the world to his will. But as he stood in the sterile hospital room, watching over Noah's unconscious form, there was a gnawing feeling in his gut that he couldn't shake. This wasn't just an accident. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the chain of events leading to Noah's crash had a connection that went beyond coincidence. It was then that he remembered the woman who haunted his thoughts, the woman whose name, like a ghost, seemed to echo through the corridors of his life, Sienna Bacall. Sienna wasn't a name Victor recognized just from the circles of power and business. She was someone from his past, someone whose presence he hadn't expected to confront again. Her appearance in Los Angeles, tied so intricately to Noah's accident, felt like fate had finally come full circle. The memories of their earlier interactions, brief and fleeting, began to resurface in Victor's mind. He had always considered her to be a shadow, a woman who flitted through the periphery of his world. But the truth was more complicated than he cared to admit. Sienna wasn't just a bystander. She was a key player in a game far more dangerous than Victor had ever imagined. When Sienna appeared before him and Nikki, it was as though time had stopped. There was a shock in her eyes, a recognition that spoke volumes. But it wasn't the kind of recognition that was expected. It was a confrontation, silent, potent, and filled with unspoken history. Victor, for the first time in a long time, felt vulnerable. It wasn't just the years of power or the wealth that left him shaken in her presence, it was the fear that maybe, just maybe, there were things about his past that he couldn't control, things he had buried so deep that they had come back to destroy him. And then, in that moment of silence, it happened. Victor, the unshakable titan of business, collapsed. His body betrayed him, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious, unable to comprehend the full scope of the danger he was facing. Nikki, shocked and horrified, knelt by his side, her face pale, her heart racing. She had never seen Victor like this, vulnerable, broken, his facade cracked. As the EMTs rushed in, Nikki's mind raced. What did Sienna know that Victor didn't? And why had his reaction been so extreme? Sienna, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. Without a word, she turned and fled. Her exit was as abrupt as it was calculated. The question that lingered in the air as she disappeared into the night was the same one that haunted both Victor and Nikki. Who was she really? What did she know? And most importantly, what was her connection to Victor? Nick and Sharon, who had been standing by, had no idea what had just transpired. They were confused, trying to make sense of the sudden chaos. Sharon, ever the protector, asked what had happened, but the words didn't come easily. Nikki, who could barely hold herself together, struggled to explain. She knew more than she was letting on, but she wasn't ready to expose the truth. Not yet. But Nikki knew that something had shifted. Something dark and buried was now resurfacing, and it would affect not just Victor, but their entire family. She had always suspected that their past in Los Angeles held secrets, but now those secrets were starting to surface with terrifying speed. Nikki knew that Sienna was more than just a name from their past. She was a ghost, a woman whose presence threatened to destroy the very fabric of their family. Victor's collapse wasn't just a moment of physical weakness, it was symbolic of something far greater. The man who had spent his life building an empire of power and control was now facing the consequences of his past. The walls that had protected him for so long had begun to crumble, and Sienna was the one with the hammer. As Victor was rushed to a private room to be monitored, Nikki couldn't shake the feeling that everything she had feared was coming true. She was no stranger to secrets, after all, she had lived through more than her fair share. But this time, it felt different. Sienna wasn't just another adversary, she was a part of something much larger, something that could unravel their family's future. It was then that Nikki's mind began to piece together fragments of memories. She had always known that there were things Victor had kept from her, things he hadn't been ready to face. She had always trusted him, but trust didn't mean understanding every part of him. And now, as the reality of what they were facing began to sink in, Nikki realized that this wasn't just a battle to protect Noah, it was a battle for their entire legacy. The presence of Sienna in Los Angeles wasn't a coincidence. It was a carefully orchestrated move, one that Victor had never seen coming. She wasn't just involved in Noah's accident, she was tied to something far darker, a scheme that could bring down everything they had built. But what exactly was Sienna after? Was she after Noah? Was she after something even bigger? Was she trying to destroy the Newmans, or was there something more personal at play? As Nikki fought to maintain her composure, she couldn't help but think back to the one question that haunted her: what was Sienna's true connection to Victor? The way she had looked at him, the way she had made him collapse with nothing more than a glance, there was a history there. But what was it? In the midst of the chaos, Sharon and Nick were left to pick up the pieces. They were confused, but they were also determined to find out the truth. As Noah remained unconscious, the stakes grew higher. The Newman family had to face not just the aftermath of Noah's accident, but the secrets of the past that were now threatening to unravel their future. But as the investigation into Noah's accident progressed, it became clear that there was more to this than anyone had imagined. Sienna Bacall wasn't just a woman caught up in a tragic event, she was a catalyst, a person who held the key to unlocking the secrets that had been buried for years. And with every new piece of information, the web of deception grew tighter. Victor knew that he couldn't run from this any longer. The woman who had made him feel powerless was back, and she was determined to make him pay for whatever he had done. But what was the price? And could he survive it? As the days passed, the Newman family was forced to confront not only the reality of Noah's accident but also the truth of their own pasts. Secrets, lies, and betrayals were no longer things that could be swept under the rug. Sienna Bacall had come to Los Angeles to make sure of that, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop her now. The city of Los Angeles had always been a place where people went to escape their pasts, to reinvent themselves. But for Victor and Nikki, it was clear that their past had come back to haunt them in the most unforgiving way. And this time, there would be no escaping it. The truth was coming, and it would destroy everything in its path. As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the Newman family would be forced to decide whether to face their darkest secrets or allow them to tear them apart. And in the end, they would discover that some things are better left buried, especially when they involve the one person who could bring everything crashing down. The sterile white walls of the hospital seemed to close in around the Newman family as they gathered anxiously in the waiting room, their eyes fixed on the doors leading to the rooms where their beloved had been rushed in a state of distress. Noah and Victor, two pillars of the family, were both lying in adjacent beds, their fates uncertain, their lives hanging in the balance. Victor, the mighty patriarch of the Newman dynasty, had collapsed unexpectedly, his strength failing him for the first time in years. Noah, his pride and joy, lay unconscious after a car accident that had shaken the foundation of the family. Nikki sat silently in the corner of the room, her face a portrait of worry, every line on her face showing the weight of 100 unsaid things. She had always been the rock of the family, the one who kept the chaos at bay, but this moment was different. As she gazed at the two men who meant everything to her, she couldn't escape the growing sense that their world was about to crumble. The walls around her seemed to close in, and she knew the storm that was coming would be like nothing they had ever faced before. Nick stood near the window, his arms crossed, his face creased with concern. His eyes flitted between his brother and father, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on the unsettling events that had led them here. It wasn't just the accident that haunted him, it was the ominous presence of Sienna Bacall, the woman who had appeared out of nowhere, and the look of sheer terror on his father's face when he saw her. It was a reaction Nick had never witnessed before, one that hinted at a long-buried past and secrets that Victor had kept hidden for far too long. Turning to his mother, Nick could no longer contain his frustration. "Mom," he asked, his voice sharp with urgency, "what is going on? What's happening here? Why didn't you tell me anything about this? What happened between Dad and Sienna?" Nikki's gaze shifted slowly toward her son, the weight of the years pressing down on her. She knew this day would come, the day when the secrets that had been carefully hidden would be forced into the light. She had always protected Victor, always shielded their family from the darker side of their past, but now, with both Victor and Noah's lives hanging by a thread, there was no avoiding it any longer. "Sienna," Nikki began, her voice thick with emotion, "is someone from our past. A very complicated person, someone who's tied to a time that none of us want to revisit. She and Victor, they go way back." She trailed off, her words heavy with the weight of unspoken history. Nick's frustration deepened as he stepped closer to her. "What do you mean, way back? Why did you keep this from me? I don't understand. What's going on with her? Why does she have such an effect on Dad? And why was he so terrified when he saw her?" His voice cracked with disbelief, the questions pouring out like a dam finally breaking. "What aren't you telling me, Mom?" Nikki looked at her son with a mixture of sadness and regret. She had kept so much from him, thinking it was for his own good. But now, with everything unraveling in front of her, there was no more room for lies. "It's not that I didn't want to tell you, Nick," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "It's just that, some things are better left unsaid. Some things, especially with Victor, are too dangerous to talk about until we know everything." Nick's brow furrowed in confusion. "Dangerous? What do you mean? What exactly are we talking about here? Who is she? What did she do to him?" Nikki sighed deeply, her eyes welling with unshed tears. "Victor and Sienna have a history, Nick. It's not a simple one. It goes beyond business, beyond anything you can imagine. Their relationship, it's entangled with secrets. Things from the past that no one ever wanted to come to light. Sienna isn't just a random woman, she's a part of Victor's past that he's tried to bury. But it seems that the past has finally come back to haunt us all." Nick's mind spun with the implications. "So, what exactly are we dealing with here? Is she dangerous? Is she the reason Noah is in that bed, fighting for his life?" Nikki's gaze flickered back to the room where Victor lay unconscious. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest, the tension thick in the air. "I don't know yet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I believe Victor does. And once he wakes up, once he can talk, we will know the truth." Nick wasn't satisfied with her answer. "What truth, Mom? What's Victor been hiding all these years? Why did he react like that when he saw her?" Nikki closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She knew she couldn't protect her family from this truth any longer. Victor and Sienna had a relationship, one that goes back years. Before you were born. Before everything changed. They were close. Too close, perhaps. But when things went wrong, when their business entanglements turned dangerous, Victor had to make some choices. Choices that left a lot of people hurt, including Sienna. Nick's eyes widened. "You're telling me that Sienna and Victor had some kind of romantic relationship? And now she's back, after all this time, and somehow involved in Noah's accident?" Nikki nodded slowly, her gaze shifting back to the hospital doors. "I don't know all the details, Nick. But I know that Sienna didn't just disappear from our lives. She's been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment has come." The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of Nikki's words hanging in the air. For the first time, Nick could see the depth of the fear that had taken hold of his mother. This wasn't just about Noah's accident or a simple family mystery, it was about something much darker, something tied to Victor's past that could tear apart everything they had built. And yet, they were all trapped in this web of deceit, with no way out but through the truth. "I don't understand, Mom," Nick said quietly, his voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why didn't you warn me about her?" Nikki swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "I didn't want to, Nick. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want any of you to know. But now, with everything happening, I realize that I can't keep this from you any longer. Victor knows more than he's letting on. And when he wakes up, we'll have the answers we've been waiting for. All the questions, all the confusion, everything will come out." Nick's eyes darkened with determination. "And what if he doesn't wake up, Mom? What if it's too late?" Nikki clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "We wait. We wait for Victor to wake up. We don't act on anything until he tells us the truth. But Sienna, she's not going to get away with this. We won't let her." As Nikki finished speaking, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. The doctors had arrived. Victor was about to wake up. And with him, the secrets of the past would be brought into the light. The truth that had been hidden for so long was finally about to be revealed. But would it be enough to save Noah? And what would it mean for the future of the Newman family? As the door to Victor's room opened, the tension in the air became palpable. The family gathered around, waiting for the moment when the truth would finally be spoken. When everything they had feared, everything they had tried to avoid, would come crashing down. What would Victor say when he woke up? And what would the Newman family be willing to sacrifice to protect their legacy? The answers, Nikki knew, were waiting just beyond the edge of the unknown. But in that moment, all she could do was hold her breath and wait for the storm to break. This narrative now expands on your prompt, diving deeper into the emotional complexity of Nikki's internal struggle, the mystery surrounding Sienna, and the tension of the family waiting for Victor's revelations. The story builds up to a sense of impending conflict and family drama, all while maintaining a coherent and immersive flow.